Certification is the way.
At Specialized Solutions, our success is directly tied to the success our customers have with our training and certification programs.
Increase your earning potential. Earn as you learn.
Specialized Solutions is committed to your success. I'm Carrie Savat, President of Specialized Solutions, and congratulations on accepting the challenge to become certified.
Soar to new heights. Push your knowledge to the extreme. Advance your career. Knowledge is the way. Achieve your goals. Certification is the solution.
Specialized Solutions is your training and certification expert. Now that we've gone over in detail how to install and configure your IIS 4.0 server, let's go into a little bit more detail and tweak some of the tools that are inherent within IIS. First, let's go over the concept of creating virtual servers. A virtual server enables you to have more than one domain name on each server so that you can have multiple sites or multiple domain names and better utilize your NT server resources. In order to do that, one of the first things you need to do is enable multiple TCP/IP addresses per NIC card on your server. Let's quickly go over how to do that. You'll need to go over to your network neighborhood and right-click, go down to Properties, go over to Protocols, click on your TCP/IP protocol, and go into the Properties. As you can see, we've already configured this with a static IP address on here, but we want to add another IP address. In order to do that, we'd go into the Advanced options and click on Add under the IP address dialog box in the middle of this window. I'm going to add 2 more IP addresses to this network card on this server. And it automatically defaults to my Class C subnet mask. So that one's added. 192.168.0.8. And it defaults again to my default Class C subnet mask. I can see all of my addresses in here. And you can create a multitude of IP addresses per network card on your server. This enables you to have many domain names or many virtual servers on each machine that you're having website hosting on. Once I've configured this within my TCP/IP properties, I'm now ready to go back to my management console within IIS and configure another virtual server. Now that I have configured several other IP addresses on my network card on Windows NT Server, I can then go reboot my server, then go into my Site Manager console and configure another virtual server there. Let's look to see how this is done. If you remember, we go to the Start menu, go to Programs, Windows NT 4.0 Option Pack, Microsoft Internet Information Server, and then the Internet Service Manager. Once that I'm in here, I go to my console root and click on Internet Information Server. And select my test server. And look at the services that I already have configured. I want to add another virtual server. I have one already configured called the KTech website. Let's go look in the properties there. And as you can see, this is the default website that was there, and I can assign an IP to this that's already configured within TCP/IP on my server. Go to the Advanced button and make sure that my TCP port is configured correctly, and look at the other SSL ports to see if I'm using SSL on this server, virtual server. Once I've done this, I can go to my test server, right-click, go to New, select Website, and create another virtual server. This one I'm going to call Specialized Solutions. And as you can see, the other IP addresses that I configured before automatically show up in my drop-down box. I'm going to assign this one .7, keep the default TCP port 80, click on Next, and create a path for my home directory. I'm going to allow read access and script access. I'm not going to choose to allow execute access, and I don't want anybody writing on this as well. I don't want anybody browsing my directory, so I'm going to leave these three options blank. And it automatically creates a new default virtual server. This is, once it's been created, all I need to do is click on Start, and now my virtual server is up and running. So as you can see, as long as you have IP addresses bound to your network card on your Windows NT machine, you can create as many virtual servers as you have IP addresses. Next, let's look at the SMTP service that comes with IIS 4.0. I'm going to show you how to configure it and how you can integrate that within your virtual servers that you've created. Before installing SMTP on your server, there are certain things that you need to do prior to setting it up on the server. The first thing is you need to take in consideration DNS. You need to configure DNS to support your SMTP server, and by doing that, you need to configure your domain name, either by securing a domain name from Internet or by configuring an internal domain name with your DNS server. You also, within your DNS record, you need to make sure that your host record or your A record is configured correctly, and your MX record is configured correctly, which is your mail exchange record. Without having those two records point to your SMTP server, your mail will not work no matter how hard you configure it on your machine. You have to have your DNS set up correctly. SMTP is the protocol used to route mail. Most people use SMTP to send mail via port 25, but in order to transfer mail back and forth between hosts, you can use SMTP in order to receive mail, but most people on the Internet community either use IMAP4 or POP3. So you need to take in consideration what your clients are going to be using in order to receive mail, how you want to do it via SMTP, POP3, or IMAP4. Now let's look at the computer and see how to set it up on the computer. Let's go back to our Start button, go to Programs, our Windows NT 4.0 option pack, our IIS tab, and go into our Internet Service Manager. You'll see that on my test server 1, which is my local machine, they already have a default SMTP site. Let's look at the properties on how to set this up. You right-click, go to Properties, and we'll see that we have named it the default SMTP site. Let's go ahead and rename this to be part of our KTEC virtual server that we've already set up. And since this is part of KTEC, we'll do the 02 IP address, and notice that it defaults to your TCP port 25, which is for your SMTP connections, and outgoing is also TCP port 25. Because this is not a POP server, it's an SMTP server, so your incoming and outgoing ports will be the same. A good feature that's integrated within IIS, and one reason why you may want to consider using the SMTP site for your websites, is that you're able to use the extended logging just like you are on your www and your FTP properties. You can log all your SMTP files as well. The operators, this is similar to the www site properties, where you can add, the default is administrators, and you can add other default names from NT to help administer or get into this part of your SMTP service. You can also limit the number of messages, the maximum number of outbound connections or messages per connection, the maximum number of recipients per message, and this is for people who might hijack your server or current customers that may want to send out spam or large amounts of bulk mail. You want to limit the maximum number of messages per IP address. That's quite a lot of information about mail. However, this is something that you need to take in consideration whether you have a small mail server for your local people or you're using it for a large amount of people that are going to be using your mail server to relay internet mail. Now, the next thing that you can send a copy of non-delivery ports to, you want to create a Postmaster account. And this is somebody that will act as the administrator for your SMTP server. The bad mail directory needs to go into a certain directory that defaults to the inetpub mailroute bad mail directory. Once you create your Postmaster account, that's just a default name for somebody who gets like all the bad messages or bounce backs or anything that does not make it through the mail server. And since my default account is KTech, I'm going to make it postmaster at ktech.com. Okay, now that you've set that up, let's go over to the Delivery tab. This sets up certain constraints upon your mail delivery that you can utilize to help control the kind of mail that goes through your mail server. You can have your local queue. This is how many mail messages are going to be lined up in order ready to go out. You can have a maximum number of retries. It defaults to 48, but you can make that higher or lower depending on how much mail is queued up in your server. The retry interval of 60 minutes is a good default because you don't want to keep retrying, like every 5 minutes, because if you have a long queue, then that will cause a lot of overhead on your server. The maximum number hop count also helps with maintaining and managing your bandwidth, because if you have a lot of hops that your mail has to go through, it takes a little bit of overhead, and if you're using a lot of mail addresses through here, it can increase your overhead dramatically. You can have a masquerade domain as well. Not a lot of people use this, but you can do that. You can have a fully qualified domain name, which we have, and that is testserver.ktech.com, since I've set ktech.com as my default web address. You can also down here click on Perform Reverse DNS Lookup on Incoming Messages. This can help control spam as well. So if somebody is forging their headers on their mail address or pretending to be somebody that they're not, then you can automatically perform a reverse DNS lookup to help control on that. The directory security is another integrated feature in this SMTP thing that builds upon NTFS, or Windows NT, and IIS. This is similar to the other directory securities in that you can allow anonymous access, basic authentication, and or Windows NT challenge and response. You can set secure communications as well, whether somebody, in order to send upon your SMTP server, they must have a valid key certificate from a certificate authority installed on the SMTP site in order to use it. You can also restrict by domain names. This way, If somebody does not have a domain name on your system, then they can't utilize your SMTP service. Or if you know somebody is trying to illegally use your SMTP service, you can deny them by domain name or by IP address, like Kim explained earlier. And then finally, when talking about relaying, this is where you not allow anybody either on your service or off your service. For instance, if somebody that has a domain name on your server is abusing their privileges, you can deny them their SMTP ability, or you can deny other people from outside of your server to go through your server as well. And that's basically some general information on the SMTP service that's integrated within IIS 4.0. IIS 4.0 also includes a news service, or NNTP, Network News Transport Protocol. This is a useful utility in small doses. However, I would not recommend using a full news server with IIS unless you're going to separate it, because it can get very resource intensive very quickly if a lot of people are posting on it. Let's take a look on how to configure it and how to utilize it. Okay, we're back to our Microsoft Management Console. We just finished the SMTP site, and right below that is our default NNTP site. We just want to right-click on that and go to Properties, and let's go through some of the tabs. The new site, the default identification is default NNTP. And since we stuck with ktech.com as our default website, let's make this a ktech.com news site. And then we need to assign it the IP address that we're using for ktech.com. Now, NNTP defaults for TCP port 119. However, this changes if you're using SSL to port 563. Limiting or having unlimited connections is an important decision, because depending on how large your news group is or how large you're going to allow it to be, you may want to limit your connections, and that way it'll decrease your overhead. You also want to consider having a connection timeout. So if you have 5,000 simultaneous connections, you may want to limit the amount of time that they're on there without actually doing something. Another good feature, since it's integrated with IIS, is that you're able to use the log file format that you choose, along with the same log file format that we use for www, FTP, and SMTP. There's just some security accounts that are included with the news server. The default one is the iUser account that's default with IIS. You want to create a password, and then you can have news site operators, and again, that's the default is administrators, but you can add other user accounts to be the site operators. In the NNTP settings, this is where we create all of our constraints for our news group. We can allow client postings, or we can limit the post size, we can limit the connection size, we can allow servers to pull news articles from the server. So if you have a large site environment, you can have several news servers and have them pull from each other specific news groups that are previously defined by your administrator. You can allow control messages as well. You can identify the SMTP server for moderated groups if you have more than one SMTP server, or if you're using an SMTP server that's not local, you can identify that here. You want to define the default moderator per domain that's going to moderate the news groups, and you want to put in the administrator email account. Next, you'll want to create a home directory and configure the properties. You can have it directory located on this computer, or you can share a directory that's located on another computer. I'm going to go ahead and install this on the default path that is defaulted within NNTP. And then we can configure our access restrictions. We can allow anybody to post, or we can restrict newsgroup visibility. I'm going to allow anybody to post. Then with content control, you can log accesses so that you can find out if somebody does post an article that is not applicable to the news group or that has information in there that you don't want in for the general public. By checking your log access account, you can find out exactly who posted that and then take action from there. You can also set secure communications from here as well. You can require them to use SSL or a valid certificate key in order to post on this news group. You can also set directory security within here, but as you can see, it's a little bit more limited than the SMTP security. Well, let's go on over to groups and create a new news group. In order to do that, it's very simple. You just click on Create New News Group and give it a name. We're going to call it KTech News, and the description is updates for IIS. That's what this news group is for, to discuss the latest updates. And we can name it a pretty name, or more commonly known as like a friendly name. And the friendly name is just going to be, I'm just going to name it KTech News since that's a real easy to remember as well. Now you can give this a read-only so that you as a moderator can only post information for other people that are a member of this news group to see, or you can have it moderated and have other people post as well, and you can look at what's going to be posted prior to it, or you can look at it moderated after it's been posted as well. And if you click moderated by, you would want to put in the email address of your moderator. So as you can see, we've created the KTech News Group, and within there, we're discussing IIS upgrades and similar information like that. It's as simple as that. Click on OK, and as you can see, it's been added. And that basically gives you a little bit more information on how to configure your news server and how to add a new news group to your IIS server. The next thing I want to cover is Index Server. Index Server is a great utility that can be used in conjunction with IIS, especially if one of your websites wants to index a certain part of their website. That's a typical good application of Index Server. There's some things that you need to know about Index Server before you configure it on your server, however. One of the most important things is that whenever you configure Index Server for a particular site, you want to make sure that the site that you're indexing is specifically identified within your server. Because if you accidentally install Index Server on your root directory, then you could very well be indexing your entire root of your C drive of your web server, and you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure you're very specific on what you want to index. The second thing to consider is hard drive space. When configuring Index Server goes by a corpus or a body of information. And you want to make sure that your corpus includes about 40% of the actual space taken up by the body of information that you want to index. So keeping those things in mind, let's go take a look at our computer on how to configure it. First, you want to go down to your Start button, go to Programs, NT40 Option Pack, and go right to Index Server and go to your Management Console. This only highlights or selects the Index Server that's located on your local machine. Within the subdirectory of this, you have different directories that you can specify in order to index per website or per machine. If we go to the properties, you'll notice that in the web properties, you have the location. The default location is your INET pub directory, but you can change that. And here's where you need to be specific on what roots or what directories that you want to index. This one, it defaults to my default site, which is my KTech website, and I want to track all the information or go through the corpus of the KTech website. So this is very specific. I can also track news groups and use index server to index my news group information, but at this time I don't think I'm going to do that. And then in the generation tab, you can filter files that have unknown extensions if you'd like, or you can generate characterizations, and you can limit the size, the maximum size of the characterizations that you want to generate. And that's basically all you need to do in order to set up index server on a website. Onto the right of this information console, you can look at different aspects of your index server. You can look at what catalog you're doing, the location of it, the size of it, the total documents inside of it, which is really important just in case if you're indexing a large corpus or a large body, then it can easily get out of control and use a lot of system resources and create a lot of overhead on your machine. So this is very important to look at. And then you can have the documents to filter, word list, and persistent indexes, and the status of that. And that's basically some brief information on NNTP, our Internet News Groups, that how you can configure one for yourself, and the caveats of doing that on your own IIS server. Next, I want to talk a little bit about MIME extensions. And MIME is just an acronym for Multi-Purpose Internet Mail Extensions, and they are used a lot when you define the type of file that you want to send to your browser. MIME types need to be manually configured every time you add a new proprietary software or service or application to your server, and are real important in order for them to run successfully. Traditionally, the way to do that is through the registry with IIS 3.0, but with IIS 4.0, you can do it through the management console. I'll show you both ways that you can edit your MIME types via your computer. We want to go to our Start button and then hit Run, and run our regedit32 command, and go to our HKey local machine. If we go to the software subdirectory, and then go to our classes subdirectory, at that point, underneath our classes subdirectory, we can edit and add MIME types manually. However, this is a kind of an antiquated way of doing things now that we have IIS 4.0. With IIS 4.0, it's a lot more simple. Let's go through that now. Okay, we go down to our Start button, click on Programs, our Windows NT 4.0 option pack, go up to our Internet Information Server, and down to our Management Console. Within our Management Console, I want to highlight the Internet Information Server that I want to change the MIME type on, which is Test Server 1. I will right-click, go to Properties, and here at the bottom of this window, I'll see Computer MIME Map. This is the MIME map that tells us what types of MIME files that are already installed, and it lets me add or edit any types of new MIME types that I want to add or edit. All I need to do is click on File Types, and on the left is a listing of all the registered file types that I currently have on my system. If I wanted to modify one, all I would do is highlight it and then click on Edit, and I'm able to modify it. Also, if I wanted to add a new type from a proprietary software, all I would need to do is click on New Type, type in the associated extension, and then the MIME type down here. And as you can see, using the Internet Information Server Management Console is a lot more intuitive than going in and editing the registry. It's also a lot easier and safer if you're adding MIME types or if you're not experienced in doing this type of modification. Now, Kim and I have gone into a bit of detail on how to plan, install, configure, and tweak all the application and services within IIS. Next, Kim wants to go into a little bit more detail on how to integrate applications within IIS.
Yeah, now we have our servers and it's built and it's time to use them. We want to go ahead and take advantage of the technologies that we have available to us. Back a couple years ago, most of the websites on the internet were something that we called static, which meant that they were written in HTML and the content really didn't change per user. Meaning if I had a website, let's say www.specializedsolutions.com, and I'm user A and I went there, the next user would log on and see the same exact page, and the next user would log on and see the same exact page. That's static content. It doesn't change unless you actually change the programming code. The server serves up the same page over and over again. Something different and a more of advanced technology allows us to do dynamic content. Dynamic content, on the other hand, acts completely different than static content. It still uses base core technologies and standards like HTML and HTML and some of the other standards like CGI, ASP, ISAPI, those types of technologies. However, it acts completely different. And what I mean is, let's say, for example, we have a website. Let's use maybe a bookstore online. And so we go to the bookstore website.